Hi, PJ. How are you doing?
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for letting me come in to view your lesson. I was able to gain a lot of knowledge and go back to my biology days. I needed some refreshers, so thank you for allowing me to come in and observe you and your students.
Yeah, no problem. I hope that you were able to see some of the things that we were doing and some of the hands-on stuff that I have going on in my classroom.
Yeah, so how do you think the lesson went? What was some of your takeaways? What were some of your areas that you felt quite confident with? And then maybe what was some of your areas that you're unsure of or you're considering maybe some modifications, if you have them, I guess. So how do you think it went?
Well, I really think I did a good job of making sure I didn't call them the same kids. So even kids with their hands up, they seem to always be the same kids with their hands up, and I make a point to acknowledge that they have their hand up and want to participate, but that I'm going to call on other people because I really want to get a good idea of where all my students are at. So I think I did a great job of making sure that I was checking in with all kids in my classroom. However, I would like to see more hands raised and there be more active participation. There weren't very many hands raised, and that's kind of discouraging at times.
Yeah, I agree. I did see you were very intentional about including all the kids and making it clear that you wanted to hear from different students. I think you also did a great job of using inquiry-based methods to ask questions. I felt like there was, sorry, there was, you had questions that obviously you pre-selected before the lesson. And you also were able to connect to some previous learning. I heard you talk a lot about what you did in the past or maybe the past couple of days and how it connected to what you were doing before. So I did see that connection there.
Yeah, I try to always do a review. I think that helps to refresh them before we move on. However, even with that review, I didn't feel like enough of my students actually had mastered the prior skill to be moving on. And I'm kind of stuck in that place of how do I get enough students ready for that next step? I mean, our vocabulary words are quite challenging with the chemical reactions and the different types of chemical reactions. So I'm wondering how I can make that more concrete for them.
Yes, a couple of things that I did notice when I was observing is I was not sure of what success looked like in this lesson. So I know that you were trying to change it up and use a lot of visuals and modeling with the chemical reactions, which I think is very helpful for visual learners. But I wasn't sure if I was supposed to be mastering the vocabulary, if I was supposed to be mastering the content or the graphing skill. So did you think about maybe writing a success criteria for the kids so they knew what they needed to walk away with at the end there? Because I can see that your class is a high level class with a lot of higher level thinking. As a non-chemistry person, I was struggling with what did success look like for you in that setting?
I have done those in years past. It's just been a very busy year this year. But I think I could get back to those I can statements and post those somewhere in the classroom and review them at the start of each lesson with maybe what they're supposed to get done that day or what percentage correct or how many correct things I want them to have on a little mini quiz at the end of class.
Because I heard you say you weren't sure if they mastered the information before, so possibly if you were to use some formative assessment techniques, you might be able to say, okay, are we ready for this lesson? And you can connect that formative assessment technique to the I can statement. Have you used formative assessment before? Are you comfortable?
I do a little bit of a scan. I have done like thumbs up or thumbs down in the past to see if kids are with me and understand what we're doing. Just like those quick type things on maybe one or two things. But I actually could use some more help of different types of formative assessments that I could give to check that might be quick checks for understanding that maybe cover a little bit more than one thing.
Do you record that formative assessment data, or have you done that in the past? Do you have a system for recording formative assessment data?
Well, typically I give like mini quizzes
Okay.
that might be like 10 questions, but those aren't given daily. So that would be more of like more assessment data that's recorded before we take like our major district assessment or something like that.
Okay.
But no, not just like short little formative things. That's mostly just my observations and my check-ins with the kids.
Well, I do have a lot of resources with diverse ways to formatively assess. If you're interested, I could possibly gather some resources and you could look through those and decide which ones you think would work best for you in your classroom, if you're
That
interested.
would be great. I'd be really interested in that.
Okay. I also noticed that you included some manipulatives, the beads, which I think is a great skill for the visual learners in your classroom. And you were trying to show that piece. So I was wondering, what about, was there an opportunity maybe for the kids themselves to have those units to be able to start to do that for those kids who are maybe hands-on learners, or do you just not have the resources? You might not have the resources, but I also thought that might help to pull in some of those kids that maybe aren't as comfortable raising their hand, but participating that way by using their hands instead of verbally speaking.
So in the lesson before, in the previous day, we did have a lot more manipulatives out.
Oh, okay.
And they were going through their packet and writing out the combinations and things like that.
Okay.
That day was just wrapping it, but maybe it would have been helpful if I had them save the models that they had made from the day before and kept those out for them when they were doing their graph.
Well, and the other thing I heard you talk about was engagement and interest in the lesson. And you talked about you wanted to increase participation of some of the inquiry-based questioning techniques you were using.
Right.
Have you thought about possibly giving kids some additional process time, or first talking over the question that you posed with a group or with a partner? Or possibly even giving them opportunity to get up and move and find new partners around the room and then come back and have a discussion about those questions. I'm wondering if some of those students, because your topic is so intellectual and high level thinking, includes such high level thinking, if kids would be more willing to share their thinking if they've had some time to talk it over a little bit with classmates to see if their thinking connects.
I love that idea. I get concerned about classroom management and things getting chaotic, especially in a science classroom. So I'm definitely willing to do that. I guess personally, I would need to see it modeled and actually, like maybe you could help me with this, actually coming together and having a list of steps to follow that I could teach the kids prior to. And like really instill the expectations and how it works. And I might even need like another like teacher or person that could come in during that time to model it for them, what it should look like.
Yeah.
Just so that it's safe in a science classroom.
Well, I'm sure that I could find some videos of past teachers that I've worked with or that I know use a lot of movement questioning techniques in their classroom that we could view together maybe first. And then we could sit down and look over a lesson, and maybe I could model one, and then we could plan together to include those pieces in maybe a lesson down the road when you feel a little more comfortable with that strategy. Would you be interested in doing that?
Yeah, I'd love that.
Okay. Is there anything else that you would want me to support you in at this time? I think we have a pretty good game plan. We talked about formative assessment pieces. And maybe we could even combine formative assessment pieces with questioning techniques in the classroom so we could we could hit two birds with one stone at that piece if we were to look at how could we make a formative assessment from some of those questioning techniques where kids are moving. So maybe we could.
Yeah, I'm wondering if maybe like I print off some class schedules and I could kind of like write a check mark next to kids that have gotten it just as like a real quick
Great idea. Yeah.
check. I could maybe incorporate that way, but I'm open to some other ways of doing that. Right now, I think that's a good area to start. Um, I don't want to get too overwhelmed with trying to do
Yes.
too much at this point.
And we can even pare down, maybe just if you would like to just focus on formative assessment, we could do that. Or if you would just like to focus on classroom engagement and some management techniques when moving, we could pick just one of those, definitely. And then when you feel more confident, we can look at some other pieces.
I think both are really important right now.
Okay.
But maybe getting a clearer understanding of the data before incorporating those might be beneficial for me to see what students still need additional help, and then even creating it, like when we are doing those groupings and partner talks, pairing kids that get it with kids who still need help so that they're telling that partner what it is and they're getting it twice. Even after
idea.
like I give, yes, you got it, or
Yes.
well, let's think about this a little further, because I think we should be really strategic in who those partners are or groups are.
That's a great idea. I also noticed that you used a lot of paraphrasing, and I also noticed that you didn't give away any correct answers with your questioning techniques, which is, I know, inquiry-based education in science has really modeled after that type of teaching practice. So I think you did a great job with really continuing to ask a question on top of another question and top of another question. I think when you start to get that student engagement, that those questioning techniques and that style that you're using will really benefit your students. I think that was a smart choice by moving into that piece. I'm just trying to look over my notes here and see anything else. Another question, just to kind of to get you to reflect this a little bit more, is how do you support your nonverbal learners? So when we move forward into these next pieces that we're going to explore together and learn from each other, I think we need to keep that on the back burners. How are we going to support nonverbal learners? Because we know that's, very few of our kids are verbal learners, and that's that paradigm shift in the classroom that we're all attempting to make, which is so challenging. How do we support them, and what can we do together, and what can we plan together to support those nonverbal learners?
That's a great question. I'll need some time to think about that because so much of what we do is lab based because of the inquiry, and I want students to kind of come to the answers on their own and use those critical thinking skills. So I think I'm going to need a little more time to ponder how to do that other than just asking the questions auditorily for them.
And I think maybe when we get into some of those, watching some of those videos where we're looking at that classroom management, that might spark some thinking that you find you're probably already doing those things in different elements of your classroom at different times. Is there anything else that I can support you with? I think we have a pretty good focus of some areas we want to work on.
I think right now we have a great starting point. So if you could just email me some dates and times that you are available, and we can set something up to meet and discuss different methods of taking formative assessment, so I could get on that part, and then we can start creating groups based off what my formative assessments are saying.
Great.
For them to interact with their peers before I have them, before I call on individuals to give me a response or an answer.
Yes, and what I can do is before we meet, I'll send you a list of some ideas that have worked for past teachers. And maybe that will give you a little bit of time for you to kind of reflect on some areas that you think you may want to go down, some new techniques that you'd like to try before we meet. And then we can work through it together and plan together. Sound good?
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate learning from you today and helping me to become a better coach. So thank you.